Hey guys, tonight we wake up not in a creaky apartment, not under fluorescent lights, but in the soft breath of the Mongolian steppe, inside a perfect circle of wood, wool, and wisdom. The wind outside rips across the grasslands like it's late for something, but your round shelter doesn't flinch, no corners, no creaks, just the slow exhale of a home built to outwit weather older than nations. You blink upward. There's a hole in the roof, on purpose. Light pours through it like a telescope aimed at the gods. Now, for those of you thinking, it's just a tent, right? Well, technically yes, but also absolutely not. Because what you're lying in isn't just a shelter. It's 3,000 years of engineering wrapped in felt and poetry, built by people who followed the stars, read the wind like a mood ring, and raised empires without ever pouring a foundation. Oh, and you probably wouldn't survive 5 minutes out there without one. No offense. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And I'd love to know, where in the world are you listening from tonight? What time is it there? Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You sit up and feel the crunch of felt under your fingers. The walls curve around you like a protective whisper. Every piece of this structure, from the floor to the tiny wooden wheel in the sky above, is there for a reason. Nothing is random. Nothing is wasted. The wind outside can scream all at once. It won't get in. You open the small, low door and peek outside. The landscape stretches flat in every direction. No trees, no fences, just golden grass and the flicker of distant sheep. And wind. Always wind. This place is defined by it, shaped by it. If buildings were books, this one is a long conversation with the atmosphere. Your boots touch ground. Cold, solid, surprising. Even now, nomads place a thin wood platform under the floor to keep dampness out and warmth in. But that's not the clever part. That's not why this home survives 100 kph gusts without flipping like a soda can in a storm. No, the secret lies in its curves. A yurt, gur in Mongolian, is round because corners are liabilities. Wind loves corners. It punches into them like a bully. But when you're round, wind flows, slides, hugs you without harm, like water in a stream bed. The air has nowhere to slam into. It just glides over the felt like a hand over silk. The outside may be wild, but inside it's always quiet. Not silent, there's always a gentle rustle, a bit of moaning rope or whispering felt, but quiet like someone holding you steady. The roundness doesn't just soften the wind, it softens time. There's no edge to bump into, no direction that feels more important than another. Everything feels equal. Everything feels circular. And the crazy part? This isn't just about wind, it's about world view. Because Mongolians didn't invent the yurt only to beat the weather. They built it to reflect their relationship to it. Historians still argue whether nomads developed yurts first in what is now Mongolia, or further west in Central Asia. But what's certain is that this structure predates many of the world's cities. While Rome was a swampy ambition and Beijing a whisper of dynasties to come, yurts had already mastered how to keep heat in, cold out, and spirits in balance. And yes, spirits, because this isn't just home, it's ceremony, it's cosmology. People are born here, married here, buried from here. You don't just pitch a yurt, you align it. The door always faces south, always. The place of the sun, the source of warmth. And beyond practical reasons like morning light and snowmelt, it's symbolic. South means life. The north side, that's sacred. You don't put trash there. You don't hang socks. That's the seat of honor, where elders or guests sit. The east belongs to women, the west to men. The center holds the hearth and everything that matters. But you're not worried about any of that right now. You're just admiring the view. The felt walls are hand-stitched, laced to a skeleton of bent wooden ribs. Everything is tied, not nailed. Flexibility is survival. You run your hand along a beam. It bends a little. Not weakness. Resilience. When wind tries to push, the yurt sways and bounces back, like it's dancing. A few horses whinny in the distance. You smell fermented mare's milk, airag, and wood smoke. Someone's breakfasting nearby. In a few minutes, a figure will emerge from their own yurt, stretch, and maybe ride off with a bow across their back. Nothing unusual here. And still, the wind keeps talking. You step back inside, pull the door shut with a thunk of wood and leather. Inside, the air feels warmer again. Safer. Not because the storm stopped, but because this home knew how to welcome it without surrendering. And you realise, maybe the real genius of the yurt isn't just engineering. It's philosophy. You sit back down in the centre of the yurt, and for the first time really look at the shape around you. It's round. Perfectly deliberately round. Not in that modern, let's make it look organic kind of way, but in the older, wiser sense, like the moon, like the sun, like the horizon that surrounds this whole steppe. You can't help but wonder, why round? Why not square like most buildings, or triangular like a tent? Turns out wind hates corners. It gets caught in them, builds up, pushes in, creates turbulence that pulls things apart like a toddler with a shoelace. Square tents? They flap, fold, and sometimes fly. Triangular ones? Too much stress on a single peak. But round is a wind's worst enemy. Or, if you're poetic about it, its dance partner. The yurt's shape forces wind to glide along its curves. No sharp edges to punch, no angles to snag. It's not resisting the wind, it's befriending it. And it works. A well-built yurt can take gusts that would rattle most cabins into firewood. One Mongolian herder reportedly said, "We don't brace against the storm. We smile and go inside." Historians still argue whether this design came from trial and error, or from deeper philosophical roots, but either way, it stood the test of time. Archaeological digs suggest people were building circular dwellings on the Eurasian steppe over 3,000 years ago. They were mobile, warm, efficient, and elegant. And the reason they're still in use today? Because they haven't needed to change. There's another trick here. Low profile. A yurt isn't tall and proud. It crouches, hugging the earth, keeping a low silhouette so the wind can't catch it. When the gusts come screaming over the grasslands, and they will, your round little home just lets them pass. No drama, no collapse. Just a quiet flex, a nod to the sky, and back to sleep. You run your hand over the inside wall. It's made of thick felt, burrs, traditionally, compressed sheep's wool, hand-beaten and sun-dried. It's soft to the touch, but dense as a winter coat. The circular shape of the yurt means the pressure of the wind spreads evenly across the structure, like hands on a drum. Instead of cracking a beam or snapping a post, the force disperses, gently but firmly, around the entire circumference. It's not just architecture, it's physics in felt form. And then there's the tension bands. You might not have noticed them right away, but if you look up, see that thick rope wrapped horizontally around the middle, holding the walls together? That's not decoration, that's genius. It's usually made of woven horsehair or yak hide, sometimes nylon these days. But its job? Hold the circular wall, the khana, in constant compression. The harder the wind pushes from the outside, the tighter the band pulls everything together. Stress becomes strength. It's kind of beautiful when you think about it. Resistance turns into cohesion. The harder life gets out there, the more tightly your home holds itself together. There's probably a life lesson in that. Several, actually. And if you're wondering about rain, because let's face it, flat places get dramatic storms, well, the roof angle is steep enough to shed water fast. The felt, meanwhile, is water-resistant, not waterproof. But with proper layering and a tight fit, water slides off like butter on a hot pan. Some yurts even have a waterproof canvas cover over the felt. A modern twist, but one even the elders tolerate now. After all, practicality always wins. You take another breath. The air inside smells like wool, wood smoke, and something fermented, comforting, earthy. The round shape helps circulate air naturally. Hot air rises and escapes through the tonneau, the open crown at the top. Cold air stays low. There's no drafty hallway or leaky attic, just one smooth convection current. Even the fire plays along, its smoke rising straight up and out like it knows the rules. And while you're marvelling at airflow, here's a quirk for you. Yurts don't echo. Their round shape and soft interior absorb sound. No shouting matches, no clattering footsteps, no sound bouncing off walls to remind you how alone you are in the middle of the grasslands. Just gentle murmurs, hushed voices, a cradle of acoustics, perfect for lullabies, or podcasts, or whispering legends about the wind. Some architects today are taking notes. Circular school buildings, dome houses, even disaster shelters. They've started realising that round shapes aren't just visually interesting. They're stronger, calmer, and, in many ways, cheaper. It's taken us a few thousand years to catch up with the steppe. Back outside, you hear a fresh gust rip across the plain. You don't even flinch. Inside your curved sanctuary, there's nothing sharp for the wind to argue with. It rolls over you like a sigh, as if the earth itself is breathing through its teeth. And you, lucky sleeper, are in the centre of the storm's blind spot. You lie back again, letting your eyes wander up to the round opening in the roof. The tonneau. It's more than just a skylight. It's a cosmic portal, a smoke vent, a cultural anchor, and a tiny round window to the infinite. On clear nights, it frames constellations. On stormy days, it lets the fires breath out while holding warmth in. And when it's covered, it's sealed with flaps that spin like eyelids. Two clever wooden shutters you can close from inside by pulling thin ropes. The tonneau is the heart of the yurt. Structurally, it holds everything together. It's the keystone of the roof, the point where every beam, the uni, converges like the ribs of a great wooden sun. But spiritually, it's the throat of the sky. You sit up and trace the beams with your eyes. They reach down like sun rays to the circular wall, each one tensioned to perfection. You think of a spider web, or a parachute, or a galaxy. The symmetry is hypnotic. Every line leads somewhere and all roads point to the tonneau. Mongolian tradition says the tonneau represents the sky. It's where smoke rises to greet the heavens, where spirits pass through, where sunlight is invited into the home. It's not just a hole, it's a connection. Historians still debate whether this spiritual symbolism came after the practical function, or whether belief shaped the engineering from the start. Either way, the result is the same. You're living under a circle of sky that breathes with you. There are strict rules about the tonneau, by the way. You don't hang things from it. You don't touch it carelessly. You certainly don't lean on it. It's sacred, a passageway, a pressure point. Some even believe it has a mind of its own. One fringe story, still whispered in certain provinces, claims that if a yurt's tonneau is built crooked or with selfish hands, the wind will punish the entire camp. Superstition? Maybe. But in a place where the air feels like a living force, you learn not to poke the spirits. And then there's the role of the tonneau during construction. Building a yurt is a group ritual, not a solo job. The tonneau is always raised first, supported by two upright poles called bagana. These pillars never touch the bare earth. They stand on stones or a wooden platform. Why? Because they're not meant to carry weight alone. They're meant to lift the sky together. Imagine that. The very centre of your house, the most load-bearing part of the roof, is held aloft by pillars that aren't allowed to touch the ground. Modern engineers might scoff. Mongolian grandmothers would scoff right back. You look up again, and the symmetry feels even more calming now. Your eyes trace the arcs of the wooden ribs. You notice how the beams are thinner toward the centre, thicker at the edges, like a subtle architectural whisper telling the yurt where to bear the load. The tonneau is round for a reason. The shape distributes weight evenly, and just as wind pressure flows across the yurt's walls, gravity flows down from the crown in a balanced, even spiral. No sagging, no snapping, just harmony. And then comes the light. Even in early morning, when the sun hasn't fully broken over the horizon, the tonneau pulls in light like a magnet. The inside of the yurt begins to glow, not in a harsh, overhead bulb kind of way, but with a soft golden hue that feels like waking up inside a campfire's memory. The beams catch it, the wool softens it, the room becomes an eggshell of amber. In winter, That light is everything. There are no windows in traditional yurts. Those are weak points for wind and heat loss. But the tonneau, it's a sun catcher. It focuses light on the hearth, where the stove sits squarely beneath it, feeding warmth upward and smoke out. And on clear nights, you get the reverse, a perfect circle of stars. You imagine the ancient herders lying on the same rugs, watching the Milky Way drift over their heads, planning routes, reading omens, counting seasons. Maybe you're not so different. Maybe this simple circle of sky taught them more than we realise. There's even one account from the 13th century by a Persian ambassador to the Mongol court, who described yurts as rooms under heaven. He wasn't being poetic. He meant it literally. And here's a quirky twist. In some modern eco-resorts, yurts now have clear plastic tonneau domes, transparent, sealed, waterproof. You can lie in bed and stargaze without letting the bugs in. It's part of the glamping craze, luxury camping, but in truth they're just rediscovering what Mongolians never forgot. You lie back down. The light from the tonneau fades as a cloud rolls overhead. The fire crackles a little lower. You pull a blanket closer and listen to the wind swirl above. It can howl all at once. It can slam and sigh and rattle the grass outside. But up there, at the very top of your world, a circle watches back. And it's not afraid. The wind's picking up now, but the yurt doesn't creak. It sighs. It shifts a little, like a sleeping giant adjusting a blanket, and then settles right back in. You glance around at the interior again and think, this thing could fly apart at any moment. It's not nailed down. There's no concrete, no bolts, no permanent anything. And yet, it feels stronger than your childhood home. The secret? It's built to come apart. A traditional yurt isn't just windproof, it's collapsible. It can be taken down in under an hour by a small family. Maybe less, if they've had practice. Which they usually do. That's the whole point. This isn't a vacation cabin. This is home for nomads. And nomads don't wait for moving trucks. You undo the bindings, unhook the lattice wall, roll up the felt like a giant carpet, and load everything onto a cart, or, in modern times, maybe the back of a truck. The poles, the roof ring, the ropes, all of it stacks neatly into a manageable pile, like a flat-pack IKEA palace, only with more wind resistance and fewer tiny screws to lose in the grass. Historians still argue whether this design originated for military flexibility or survival migration, but either way, the mobility of the yurt became one of its greatest strengths. Genghis Khan didn't build castles. He built people who could vanish by morning and show up 1,000 kilometers away with goats, bows, and breakfast ready. The yurt's ability to disappear and reappear with almost no trace makes it, in a way, the opposite of colonial architecture. It doesn't conquer the land, it visits. It doesn't dominate the environment, it dances with it. That also makes it extremely eco-friendly. No permanent damage, no concrete foundations, no rebar. Just wood, felt, rope, and respect. After a yurt is gone, the steppe reclaims the spot in days. Like a tent, yes, but also like a ghost, gracious, clean, and mostly invisible. And the real trick is in the geometry. The walls, the khana, are made of crisscrossed wooden slats that fold like an accordion. They're light, flexible, and strong in a group like a school of fish. The roof poles, uni, sit on top of the wall frame, held in place not with screws or glue, but with gravity and balance. The tension band we mentioned earlier wraps around everything, keeping the circular shape snug like a belt around a woolly waist. Nothing is forced. Everything is supported. You step outside into the wind again. The yurt squats on the plain like a wise, silent animal. If it were alive, it would be the kind that watches you patiently, knowing things you don't. The kind that doesn't fear storms, it was born from them. Nearby, a young herder is taking one down. You watch. First, he removes the outer canvas and rolls it with practiced hands. Then the felt, thick, warm, still carrying the sun's heat. His mother folds it while muttering about goats. The roof poles come next, each one slid from its spot in the tonneau like a straw from a juice box. The entire process is rhythmic, almost meditative. No shouting, no power tools. Just knots, ropes, and a quiet conversation with the wind. There's even a tradition that when a yurt is dismantled, it should be done with intention. No tossing, no dragging. Every piece is laid down respectfully, because someday it will rise again. Modern designers have tried copying this. Modular houses, dome shelters, expandable ecopods, but most still require a flatbed truck and 3 permits. Meanwhile, Mongolian families are out here assembling weatherproof homes with their bare hands and a piece of string. You duck back into your yurt and look around. It's weird to think this whole place could be gone in 45 minutes. It doesn't feel temporary, it feels eternal, like it's always been here and always will be. And maybe that's the trick. It's not about lasting forever in one place. It's about always being ready to last wherever you go. There's something comforting in that, in knowing that your shelter isn't rooted but loyal, that it goes with you, that it remembers how to fall apart and come back together. Kind of like us, really. So the next time your apartment door jams or your window leaks, imagine a place with no hinges, no drywall, no locks, and still more warmth than a winter coat. A home that collapses gracefully and rises with dignity. That's the magic of the yurt. You stretch out your legs on the thick felt rug, brushing aside a carved wooden bowl. Everything inside the yurt feels placed with quiet purpose. No clutter, no accident. Even the fire in the stove sits directly beneath the tonneau, right where the smoke can slide out like a polite guest. But more than function, there's meaning woven into the very layout. Because inside a yurt, space isn't just used, it's lived through. You notice how everything curves with the walls. There's no furniture shoved into corners, there are no corners. The bedrolls, the stove, the storage trunks, even the small family altar, they all radiate from the centre like spokes on a wheel. And like a wheel, the balance isn't visual, it's spiritual. See, Mongolian yurts aren't arranged randomly. There's an invisible compass at work here. The door, always facing south, sets the whole tone. Step in, and to your left, the east is the women's side. That's where you'll find cooking tools, cradles, tea supplies. On the right, the west is the men's domain. Saddles, bows, tools, maybe even a wrestling belt if someone's proud. And straight ahead, along the northern wall, that's sacred ground. Historians agree this layout predates Buddhism's arrival in Mongolia, which makes it both pre-religious and deeply religious in its own way. That back wall is where you place family heirlooms, portraits and offerings. If an honoured guest visits, they sit in that northern space. If a bride is introduced to the family, she enters and bows there. If someone dies, their spirit lingers in that corner before journeying out through the roof. You don't just rearrange furniture in a yurt. That would be like repainting a cathedral because you got bored. There's even an etiquette to how you move around the interior. You walk clockwise. Always. You don't step over someone's legs. You don't touch the central pillars unless you're invited. And you definitely don't point your feet at the hearth. That's sacred. Disrespect the hearth and you might find your airag mysteriously souring. Historians still argue whether these customs arose from practicality or cosmology. Or maybe practicality was cosmology back then. Either way, they've lasted. And they make sense. In a home where the universe is circular, your movements should flow like the stars. The fire crackles softly, reminding you that the centre of the yurt isn't just for symmetry, it's for survival. The hearth is both heat and heart. That's why every pole, every wall, every person orbits it. It's the one place everyone shares. And here's a quirky twist. There are no chimneys in a traditional yurt, just the open tonneau. The smoke curls up and out like a thought rising skyward. But it doesn't rush. The design is so balanced that the hot air lifts gently, creating just enough circulation to keep the air fresh without sucking out the warmth. You take a breath. The air is dry, warm, tinged with wood and wool and maybe a whisper of last night's stew. There's no artificial breeze, no hum of electricity, just you and the atmosphere, dancing in a silent agreement that's been honoured for millennia. Even the furniture, when it exists, follows a philosophy. Low tables, stools, no towering wardrobes or heavy shelves. Why? Because in a storm, anything tall becomes a threat. A sudden gust could send a bookcase flying. but a low chest, hugging the wall, safe, smart, simple, and the decorations, often hand-painted in bright oranges, blues and yellows, traditional Mongolian motifs that ripple across bed frames and storage boxes like miniature sunrises. The patterns aren't random either. They symbolize protection, prosperity, eternal knotwork. Every swirl and line carries weight. There's even a tradition where young couples are gifted furniture painted by family members. The designs are like visual blessings, wishes encoded in wood grain and pigment. You glance at the north wall again. There's a small shrine with a brass bowl, a piece of butter, a few coins, and a photo of a grandfather in military uniform. No dust, no cobwebs. It's not just a shelf, it's a portal, a place where memory still sleeps. You lie back down, understanding a little more than you did before. The yurt isn't a building, it's a diagram, a mandala, a world view wrapped in felt. Every placement, every path, every item contributes to the balance. And balance, as it turns out, is how you outsmart the wind. You pull the thick wool blanket over your shoulders and feel the warmth settle in like a second skin. It's not the heat of modern insulation, the synthetic kind that suffocates while it seals. This is something else. Softer, older, smarter. Welcome to the secret weapon of the yurt, felt. On the outside, the wind is clawing at the walls again, like it's trying to peek in. But inside, you're surrounded by a quiet cocoon. No rattling, no chill, just thick, breathable silence. The Mongols have used felt as insulation for centuries, maybe longer. Sheep's wool is the main ingredient, not just because it's available, but because it's miraculous. When compressed and matted together through beating, rolling and hot water, wool becomes something else entirely. Weather armour. Felt keeps warmth in, but still breathes. It absorbs moisture and then lets it go when the air dries. It repels water just enough to delay saturation. It's flame resistant, and it's biodegradable. Basically, it's the ultimate off-grid building material, crafted by sheep, perfected by humans with clubs and elbow grease. Historians still debate the exact origin of felt making on the steppe. Some claim it came from ancient Turkic tribes, others argue it evolved independently in multiple regions. But one thing's clear, Mongolian nomads took the art to another level. Making yurt felt isn't glamorous. It involves spreading raw wool on the ground, pouring hot water over it, and then rolling and stomping it into dense, fibrous sheets. Sometimes a horse is involved, literally dragging the roll to flatten it faster. Yes, it's as labour-intensive as it sounds, and yes, they've been doing it the same way for centuries. The layers of felt on a traditional yurt vary with the seasons. In summer, you might use 1 or 2, light and breathable. In winter, you pile on more, sometimes up to 5 thick layers around the entire structure. It's like adding sweaters to a house. Wool sweaters that can outwit Siberian cold fronts. And it's not just about insulation. Felt acts like a wind buffer, muffling the outside world. It creates a sound barrier that turns storms into lullabies. It slows the pace of life inside. The moment you step through the door, it's like entering a padded time capsule. You press your hand to the wall. It's warm. Not blazing hot like a radiator, but radiating a quiet heat that builds slowly and never seems to leave. The yurt doesn't heat up quickly, but once it's warm, it stays that way. Heat rises from the stove, spreads through the air, and then is gently caught by the felt, like a whisper caught in cupped hands. This thermal balance is why the yurt doesn't need insulation ratings, it just works. It worked at minus 40 degrees Celsius long before anyone invented double glazing or foam panels. And even now, in the 21st century, many modern yurts still use traditional felt, sometimes reinforced with canvas, but still riding on the woolly shoulders of ancient wisdom. You smile as you remember a quirky anecdote. In one remote village, a grandmother refused to upgrade her yurt's felt to newer synthetic materials because she claimed, "They don't remember you." That's what she said. The old wool, she believed, carried memory. It knew the family. It knew the winters. It had history. Scientists would call that sentiment. Engineers might call it superstition. But when you're lying inside a living history book made of sheep hair and sacred geometry, it's hard not to agree with her. And there's more to the layering than just stacking felt. The positioning matters. Overlapping seams are angled to redirect rain. Wind-facing walls might get an extra flap or a weighted edge. It's like origami, but for weatherproofing. Some yurts even have a layer of reed matting beneath the felt. It adds stiffness and prevents sagging. Others, especially in wetter areas, add an outer canvas. But at its core, the yurt remains a felt fortress. You inhale deeply. The scent is unmistakable. Clean wool, sun-dried grass, maybe a hint of the fire that burned last night. It's earthy in the best possible way, not manufactured, not pumped through vents, just lived in. Even the floor is often covered with felt rugs layered like geological strata. You're walking on warmth, sleeping on insulation, existing in a breathable shell that hugs you like a giant woolly lung. There's something ancient about it, something primal, like your bones remember this kind of warmth. Not the kind that hums through baseboards, but the kind that radiates from walls made by hands, feet, horses, and patience. You close your eyes, and the wind howls a little louder, but you don't mind. It can't reach you here, because your house, it wears a coat of memory. The wind is doing its dramatic thing again, racing across the steppe like it's late for an appointment, but inside the yurt it's just background noise, a gentle roar, like the world breathing through a distant hallway. You sip something warm from a wooden bowl and let the quiet of the structure settle around you. Because here's the secret that no textbook ever really explains. Mongolians don't fight the wind, they listen to it. You can see it in how they ride their horses, how they pitch their homes, how they plant their herds. Wind isn't an obstacle, it's a teacher, a presence, sometimes a mood. And the yurt? It's not built to block it, it's built to understand it. There's an old saying whispered among herders. The wind knows who built your home. It's partly a warning and partly a compliment, because when your house can survive the tantrums of a Mongolian winter, it means you've done something right. You haven't just built a structure, you've built a relationship. Historians still debate how much ancient Mongolian life was shaped by the wind versus other factors like geography, climate, or resource access. But ask any elder, and they'll tell you plainly, the wind is the boss out here. And you don't argue with your boss, you adapt. You remember watching earlier as that herder removed the outer felt layers. One side flapped harder than the other, and without thinking he adjusted a corner, shifted a weight, moved with the current like someone dancing in a kitchen. No struggle, no shouting, just a subtle collaboration with the sky. Because wind out here doesn't come gently, it comes in howling, sideways, trying to teach you something about impermanence. If you try to stand against it, you'll fall, but if you bend, like the yurt does, you stay upright. That's why everything in the yurt has some give to it. The lattice wall flexes under pressure. The roof poles shift slightly in their slots. The ropes are tight, but not too tight. There's a hum of tension, but never strain. You don't build rigidity into a system that has to live with the wind. You build rhythm. And you don't curse the wind when it kicks up. You read it. Experienced herders can tell what kind of storm is coming just by the sound in the grass. A high-pitched hiss, dry squall, low and guttural, snow on the way. Some claim they can feel changes in their teeth or hear voices in the whistling. Science may shrug, but try living with nothing between you and the sky for 20 years and not developing some strange intuitions. There's even a quirky belief, more poetic than practical, that certain winds carry memories. That gusts from the north bring news of ancestors. That southern breezes open the heart. It's not doctrine. It's not a religion. It's just a way of being with the elements. You stretch and lean back against the wall, letting your body mould into the curve of the structure. The felt presses lightly into your back like a giant palm. There's something reassuring about being in a space where nothing is stiff or sharp. Even the light moves softly here. The fire crackles gently. Outside, the grass bends low. Everything knows how to yield without breaking. And the yurt? It's smiling in its quiet round way, letting the wind pass without a fuss. You think of modern buildings. Steel towers, concrete walls, glass boxes all trying to dominate space. And then you think of this. A circle of wool and wood designed not to defeat nature but to hum along with it. One engineer once described the yurt as a building in conversation with the wind. You like that? Because that's really what it is. A dialogue. A slow, respectful back and forth. You don't live in a yurt so much as you live with it. So when the storm hits harder, and it will, you don't panic. You tighten a strap, adjust a flap, throw on an extra layer of felt, and then you go back inside, pour another cup of milk tea, and listen. Because here, the wind isn't the enemy. It's the oldest roommate you've ever had. You're starting to notice things now, details you'd missed before, like how the two tall wooden columns holding up the roof don't quite touch the ground. They stand on small stones or wooden blocks, their bases just slightly elevated. Not much, just enough to make you wonder, why? Turns out it's not an accident, it's not laziness, it's not even entirely practical, it's symbolic. These are the bagana, the central pillars of the yurt, connecting the earth to the sky through the tuno, the circular crown. Structurally, they support the roof, yes, but spiritually, they hold up the universe. And you don't let the universe rest directly on dirt. This belief has roots deep in Mongolian cosmology. The earth is alive, the sky is sacred, and between them is you, your yurt, your fire, your family. The bagana stand in that space between, and so they must remain elevated, respected, and clean. Letting them touch the bare ground would be like letting a prayer fall face first in the mud. Historians still argue whether this taboo began as shamanic tradition or Buddhist influence. Some even point to pre-Buddhist animist beliefs that viewed the yurt itself as a living organism, with the pillars as its spine. But whatever the origin, the message remains: don't disrespect the structure that holds up your sky. You lean against one now, gently, respectfully. It creaks a little, and you instinctively mutter a silent apology, just in case. Because there are rules here, quiet ones, old ones, like how you never walk between the two bagana. You always move around them. That space in the middle, that's the direct line between heaven and hearth. It's the vertical axis of the world. You don't cross it casually. You don't stand there to argue. That's where the fire breathes. That's where prayers rise. Even children know not to run between the pillars. Even tourists who don't believe in all that spiritual stuff often feel a strange pause when they approach the space. Something in your gut tells you, maybe not. You sit and look up. The beams of the roof radiate out like a sunburst. Each one slots into the tuno, anchored by gravity and ancient craftsmanship, and each one is lightly supported by the two bagana, standing tall and humble in the center of it all. They don't shout, they don't move, they just exist, upright and eternal. There's a kind of silence around them, not emptiness, but presence. You feel it in your shoulders, in your breath, like you're in the middle of something sacred and extremely well balanced. And here's a quirky little fact. When yurts are used for ceremonies, especially weddings, some families decorate the bagana with ribbons, silk scarves, or even bells, not for aesthetics, but for blessings. A way of thanking the structure for holding the moment. Some say the pillars are male and female. Others say they're brothers. Others say they're neither, and we should stop trying to humanize architecture. But whatever the metaphor, they're always a pair. Always standing together. Always carrying the sky. You glance back at the doorway. A breeze sneaks in through the fabric flap, but it doesn't reach this center space. It's oddly still here, like the eye of a cyclone. Everything in the yurt rotates around these pillars. The stove, the furniture, the family, even the stories. Old herders tell tales of bagana that cracked when someone lied inside the yurt, of pillars that creaked when an enemy entered, of dreams that came truer when slept beside one. Whether you believe it or not, it's hard to ignore the quiet gravity they carry. You reach out and touch one, just a brush of fingertips. It's smooth, worn, smells faintly of smoke and time. You imagine all the hands that have gripped it during setup, all the eyes that have looked to it in storms, all the babies born beneath it, all the fires that have warmed its grain, and suddenly it doesn't feel like a pillar. It feels like a witness, so you let your hand rest there a moment longer. not out of superstition, out of respect, because in a home that bends with the wind, these two beams stand quietly firm, not against the sky, but with it. The door creaks open slightly and sunlight spills across the felt floor like melted gold. Morning has finally arrived, slipping through the east with a quiet grin. You stretch, yawn and glance at the low doorway. It faces south like always. That's not an accident. That's another one of the yurt's sacred rules. The entrance must open to the south. Why? Because that's where the sun lives. South means warmth. South means life. In a land where survival depends on grazing cycles and thawed pastures, southern exposure is more than just a design choice. It's a prayer answered. The sun pours into the yurt gently in the morning, heating the interior with natural light, thawing the night's breath from the felt walls. But it's not just about sunlight, it's about orientation. When you enter a yurt, you're stepping into a space with its own gravity, its own compass. You enter from the south, the door low, so you must bow slightly, not just for convenience, but for humility. From there, everything else aligns. Women to the east, men to the west, ancestors to the north. That south-facing doorway is your entry point into an entire worldview. It's the line between the everyday and the sacred, the profane and the poetic. Historians still argue whether this spatial layout was influenced by ancient Turkic sun worship, early Buddhist directional symbolism, or purely practical weather considerations. But the truth is, probably all three. In Mongolia, utility and belief rarely live apart. You stand and approach the door. Outside, the wind is calm for once, the steppe stretching in soft hills and ripples of gold. There's something oddly satisfying about how the yurt connects you to this landscape, not by dominating it, but by joining it. The door doesn't just face south, it greets the world. And then you hear it, a sound floating in from another camp, faint but piercing, the strings of a Morin Kur, the horsehead fiddle. You freeze, smiling. The Morin Kur is Mongolia's national instrument, a two-stringed fiddle carved with a stylized horse's head, played with a bow strung from horsehair. It doesn't sound like a violin. It sounds like wind turned into music, like a bird singing through an empty canyon, like the steppe remembering your name. Traditionally, every family had one, kept near the northern wall next to the family altar, protected like a holy object. Because it wasn't just for music, it was for memory. The Morin Kur is said to mimic the sound of a galloping horse, or a weeping soul depending on the tune. It's music meant for great distances, for carrying stories across the plains. There's a legend, of course there is, that the first Morin Kur was built by a man whose favourite horse was killed. Grieving, he carved its head into the instrument and strung its hair into melody. He played so beautifully that even the wind paused to listen. You step outside and let the notes drift over you. No stage, no microphone, just a man somewhere nearby, sitting cross-legged at the mouth of his yurt, bowing across strings, telling the sky his secrets. And the music moves with the wind. In traditional camps, people say the fiddle shouldn't be played inside during storms. It stirs emotions, calls things. The vibrations can wake up more than just memories. So it's often played at dawn or after dinner, when the air is calm and the yurt feels more like a drum than a house. You walk around the outside of your yurt now, hand trailing along the curved felt. Everything makes more sense. The doorway, the light, the fire, the Morin Kur resting just beyond hearing range. Even the silence feels intentional. Back inside, you glance again at the south-facing door. The sunlight's already shifting. The room is warmer, brighter, and suddenly you feel like the doorway isn't just letting light in, it's letting you out, into a world where every direction holds meaning, and even the wind has a favourite tune. Later that day, a soft commotion draws your attention to the neighbouring camp. Several people, men, women, children, are assembling a new yurt. Not repairing, not patching, building. And it's happening fast. In less time than it takes to make a pot of tea, they've unpacked a pile of wood, felt and rope, and begun turning it into a home. You watch transfixed. It's not chaotic, It's choreography. Everyone knows what to do. No instructions, no blueprints. Just years, sometimes generations, of muscle memory guiding hands and feet. There's an old man unrolling the felt with the precision of a surgeon. 2 younger men unfolding the kana, the wooden lattice wall, with a fluid motion that makes it look like fabric. A grandmother ties tension bands while scolding someone's posture, and a child, maybe 6 or 7, is quietly unspooling a length of rope like it's the most important job in the world. Because it is. This yurt, like every yurt, depends on tension and timing. It's a balancing act, literally. The kana walls are erected first, forming a circle. They don't stand alone. They lean inward just enough to keep each other upright. Then comes the tuno, the central ring, hoisted into place by 2 people holding the bagana poles beneath it. After that, the roof poles slot into place, radiating out like ribs from a heart. It's a house made of geometry and gravity. No nails, no glue, just knowledge. Historians still debate the role of gender in yurt construction. Some say men built and women decorated. Others argue women were the true architects, managing everything from felt production to rope weaving. The truth is less rigid. Like everything in nomadic culture, roles were fluid. Whoever knew what to do, did. And then there's the symbolism. The clan assembling this yurt is clearly treating it as more than just a shelter. Before the final roof pole is placed, the oldest woman touches the tuno and mutters something under her breath. A blessing? A memory? Maybe both. When the last felt layer is added, the group pauses. Just for a second, like they're letting the structure settle into the earth. And it does, like it's breathing for the first time. You ask someone nearby who built the yurt. He shrugs and says, "The wind helped." You believe him, because this isn't construction in the modern sense. It's a ritual, a social act. Everyone plays a part. Everyone has a hand in raising the circle, and everyone respects the space when it's done. There are stories about yurts being built in the middle of weddings during snowstorms at the edge of battlefields. Once, reportedly, a group of nomads fleeing invaders assembled 5 yurts in under 30 minutes, one of them while riding horseback. Is it true? Historians debate that one too, but the legend remains. The tools haven't changed much either. Axes, awls, knives, bone needles. Maybe a power drill if someone's feeling fancy. But more often than not, the pieces are handcrafted. The wood is curved using steam and time. The ropes are braided from horsehair or camel hide. Every part of the yurt is touchable, malleable, fixable. Even the decorative elements are hand-done. Look closely at the finished yurt's door, bright orange with intricate patterns of clouds, fire and knots. Those designs aren't just pretty, they ward off bad luck. They echo ancient motifs passed down across empires. Some say the patterns come from dreams, others say they're maps of the wind. You wander back toward your own yurt, the sun beginning to drop toward the western edge of the sky. The air cools slightly. Somewhere nearby, a pot clinks softly against a metal stove. A baby cries once, then goes quiet. You look at your yurt differently now, not as a product, not as a thing you have, but as something that was made, by hands, with time, with purpose. Because even in a world of concrete and steel and digital blueprints, there's still something unbeatable about a structure that can be built by a village, torn down by a family, and carried away by a horse. And when the wind returns, and it always does, you know this round, wool-wrapped miracle will meet it, not with defiance, but with grace. As night falls again across the steppe, a calm settles into the land, but your mind drifts elsewhere, into history. You lie back inside the yurt, the fire reduced to embers, and realize this isn't just a family shelter or a practical solution for wind. This little round house once helped run the largest contiguous land empire in human history. Yes, Genghis Khan slept here too. It's a strange thought. The same felt walls, the same wooden ribs, the same crown of sky. You lying beneath the tuno, watching stars peek through. Him planning invasions that would redraw the known world. Because while castles crumbled and palaces rotted, yurts kept moving. Empires that took decades to build were matched by an army that could pack up in minutes. Historians agree, one of the great logistical advantages of the Mongol Empire wasn't just speed or brutality, it was mobility, and yurts made that possible, not just for soldiers, but for the generals, the wives, the blacksmiths, the priests, the administrators. The entire infrastructure of empire travelled in circles. There's even a special name, the Ordu, meaning camp, or more precisely the movable court of the Khan. It's where the word horde comes from, not the chaotic swarm you picture from movies, but a well-organised moving capital, a yurt city on horseback. These weren't average yurts either. Genghis Khan's own mobile palace was supposedly mounted on a giant cart pulled by dozens of oxen, a rolling fortress of felt and power, complete with golden ornaments, guards, and high-ranking advisors. Marco Polo even described it, though historians still argue whether he ever actually saw it, or just repeated stories told by others. Still, the principle holds. The Mongol elite didn't build walls, they built motion, and there was wisdom in that. Walls mean permanence, they mean something to defend, but if your palace rolls, if your home moves with the wind, you're never trapped. You don't defend land, you use it. It's not that they didn't build anything permanent. Karakorum, their capital city, had stone structures and temples, but even there, yurts dotted the landscape like stars across a map. When the court moved, the city thinned out like mist. Gone by morning, the empire in many ways lived from camp to camp. One quirky anecdote you'll love. A Persian chronicler once wrote that Mongol diplomats held meetings inside their yurts with the same ceremony that European kings used in marble halls. Only the kings couldn't move their halls. The Mongols, they just pointed their door south and kept going. You look around your own yurt now with fresh eyes. This soft, round place doesn't look like a war room. But it could be. The structure is identical. The difference is intent. And don't forget, the yurt was also a classroom, a courtroom, a hospital, a council chamber. It hosted marriages, births, coronations, strategy sessions, and rituals. When the Mongol army conquered new lands, it wasn't just soldiers advancing. It was knowledge. It was families. It was culture rolling forward under felt roofs. Even today, when Mongolians gather for major festivals like Nadam, the celebration of wrestling, archery, and horse racing, entire fields bloom with yurts. Each one is like a little cell in a massive breathing organism. Inside, deals are made, prayers are whispered, elders drink tea and debate the future, children learn to tie knots, and the wind never quite forgets. You lie back down and listen for it. That quiet reminder that the world never stands still, that everything, even empires, moves. And in the middle of all that motion, the yurt stays balanced, not because it's fixed to the earth, but because it knows how to move with it. You've spent enough time inside the yurt now to realise something important. This isn't a tent, and it isn't a cabin. It's something in between, or beyond, a structure that defies the usual boxes we put homes in, figuratively and literally. And it's worth pausing to understand the name itself. Because the word yurt, that's not even the Mongolian term. The correct word is ger, pronounced more like ger. In Mongolian, ger simply means home, not temporary shelter, not nomadic structure, just home. The word is short, humble, and complete. It doesn't need decoration. Yurt comes from the Turkic languages further west. Russians adopted the word and spread it, and eventually Western anthropologists and backpackers ran with it. But to a Mongolian nomad, calling their ger a yurt can feel like you're calling a temple a shack. You think about how many Western camping terms are built on the idea of roughing it, as if being in a structure like this must be a downgrade. But in Mongolia, there's no such idea. A ger isn't something you endure, it's something you return to. That said, the ger has never been frozen in time. It adapts, quietly, cleverly. Modern gers might use canvas instead of thick felt. They might have solar panels strung up beside the door, charging a single bulb and a phone. Some even come with satellite dishes now, tiny bowls aimed at the sky beside the great bowl of the steppe itself. And still, nothing about the soul of the structure changes. One quirky example. There's a guy in the Gobi Desert who live streams from his gyr. Not about fashion, not about crypto, just weather updates and camel births. He sits inside his felt-wrapped circular house with Wi-Fi, a cup of milk tea and a deep respect for the wind. That's the paradox of the gyr. It moves with time, but never loses shape. Even city dwellers in Ulaanbaatar still build them. In fact, nearly 60% of the capital's population lives in gyr districts, entire neighbourhoods of round homes. There, the structure remains the same, but the purpose has shifted slightly. They're not mobile anymore. They're fixed, yet people still choose the gyr over rectangular apartments. Why? Because it's still home. You reach out and touch the wall beside you. It's soft but sturdy. Not mechanical, but not primitive either. Just right. Like someone solved an equation for shelter, and this was the answer. And maybe that's what makes the gyr so hard to categorise. It's not an in-between. It's a beyond. Beyond our notions of modern or traditional. Beyond east or west. Beyond permanence or impermanence. It just is. A shape that survived conquests, communism, tourism and time. A space that never needed walls to create warmth. A house that doesn't box you in. It circles you in. So, yeah, call it a yurt if you must. But once you've lived inside one, even for a night, it'll always be a gyr. The sun is high now, sharp against the wide Mongolian sky, and something unexpected catches your eye outside. A shiny, flat panel mounted at an angle near the base of a nearby gyr. It's a solar panel, modest in size, humming silently as it converts sunlight into power. You blink, then laugh softly. Of course, because somehow it fits. The gyr has never been about nostalgia. It's not frozen in the past, clinging to tradition like a photograph. It evolves, quietly, efficiently, and without ceremony. If there's one thing nomads have always done well, it's adapt. And now, they've adapted into the 21st century, felt and all. Solar panels are everywhere in the countryside now. Not just in luxury camps or glamping resorts for Instagram travellers, but in actual herder families' lives. Panels charge lights, phones, radios, even televisions. Some have satellite receivers set up beside the GER like modern-day stone altars to the information gods. But here, it's not a contradiction. It's just life. Historians still debate whether this is progress or dilution, whether modern technology undermines the authenticity of nomadic life. But if you ask the nomads, they'll just shrug and say, why not both? A gyr with Wi-Fi is still a gyr. A satellite dish doesn't make the sheep wander off. The solar-powered light bulb just means you can fix your saddle after sunset without tripping over your neighbour. It's not just technology either. The Soviet era brought more dramatic changes. During the 20th century, efforts to modernise Mongolia under communist influence led to massive social shifts. Nomads were encouraged or forced into settlements. Gyrs were replaced by apartment blocks in Ulaanbaatar, and state-owned herding collectives replaced traditional family-based pastoralism. But the GR refused to vanish. Even in the most concrete-heavy decades of Soviet influence, families kept their gyrs, sometimes beside their new apartment buildings, sometimes secretly in the countryside. After the collapse of the Soviet Union in 1990, when the economy nosedived and state structures crumbled, people returned to the one thing that had always worked. Round homes that folded, travelled and knew the wind. And now, in the aftermath, the gyr has only grown stronger. You look around at the other homes dotting the plain. Some are modern hybrids, insulated panels, prefabricated doors, vinyl outer layers. Others are completely traditional, stitched by hand, insulated with old-school sheep felt. All are occupied, all are working. There's no manifesto here, just practical evolution. There's even a new gyr on the horizon that looks different, bigger, sharper angles around the top. You're told it's a smart gyr, equipped with modular heating, LED lighting, and even air quality sensors. Designed by Mongolian architects with one foot in the future and one firmly in the felt. And it still faces south. You sip tea brewed over a modern propane stove, because who has time to gather dung in a storm? And think about how gracefully the Gyr holds its balance between past and present. In a world obsessed with permanence, real estate and fences, this round mobile house has survived not by staying the same, but by staying smart. One herder once put it this way: the world tries to build bigger, we build better, and when better doesn't work, we roll it up and build somewhere else. You chuckle, not because it's funny, but because it's true. The Gyr isn't anti-modern, it's postmodern in the best way. Resilient, intentional, minimal, and still beautiful. And here's a quirky detail you didn't expect. Some younger Mongolians are using QR codes on their GRs for payment, for tourism information, for live streams. It's absurd, and it's brilliant. A way to say, yes, this is a 3,000-year-old dwelling, and yes, you can Venmo me. Even the government has caught on. In Ulaanbaatar, entire Gyr districts have been retrofitted with new infrastructure, paved roads, sewage systems, broadband access, all to preserve the culture while improving quality of life. It's not perfect. Urban Gyrs face pollution, zoning issues and overcrowding, but still, they endure. You rest your hand on the felt beside you. It's warm from the afternoon sun. Above, the tuno glows like an eye of light. A fly buzzes lazily through the air. Somewhere, a kid is watching cartoons on a smartphone under a roof that would impress Genghis Khan. And you think, maybe this is what surviving looks like. Not by resisting the future, but by wrapping it in wool and pointing it toward the sun. The air is heavier now, cooled by the setting sun and steeped in that quiet just before night fully arrives. You step outside the Gyr, stretch your arms wide and scan the horizon. There's no traffic, no fences, just grassland and sky stretching so far that you forget what edge of the world used to mean. You take a few steps, feel the dry grass crunch underfoot, and think about everything this little home has witnessed. Not just weather or war or Wi-Fi, but life. Full, emotional, complicated life. Because for all its structural elegance, the Gyr is more than physics and portability. It's where everything happens. People are born here, wrapped in soft felt, placed beside stoves burning yak dung, bathed with boiled well water poured by grandmothers. No hospital corridors, no sterile white walls, just breath, wood and firelight. And people die here too, quietly. Sometimes not quietly, often surrounded by family, sometimes not. Either way, the Gyr becomes a vessel for crossing, the place where the breath leaves, the body lies, and the spirit makes its final circle through the roof. Always through the tuno, that hole in the sky. In traditional belief, the dead are not carried through the door. That's for the living. Instead, their spirits exit upward, carried by smoke and memory. The idea being, the soul should rise, not crawl. There's dignity in that. Historians still debate the finer points of these practices, especially how much of them are Buddhist, how much are shamanic, and how much are simply ancient logic with spiritual flair. But there's no debate about the emotional weight a Gyr can carry. These round rooms don't just shelter, they hold. You walk slowly around one now. It's closed up tight for the night. No smoke, no sound. But someone lives there, and in that space, weddings have happened. Arguments, illness, love, regret, games, meals, everything. There's even an old saying, if your child learns to walk in a Gyr, they'll never lose their direction. You can imagine it, small bare feet pattering in circles on a warm felt floor, orbiting the stove, bumping into knees and blankets, always staying within the curve of the world. No sharp corners, no hard walls, just loops, repetition, safe geometry. The Gyr isn't just a building, it's a memory machine. You sit down on a rock a few feet from the doorway and watch the last light slip away. A lone dog trots across the hill, then disappears. A herder whistles faintly in the distance. The world narrows to shadows and wind. There's something about this moment that feels round, not in shape but in rhythm. A day closing the same way it began, with wind, quietness, and that deep sense of being held, not by stone or steel, but by rhythm, warmth, and the circle you've chosen to call home. And here's a final quirky fact for the day. Mongolians often leave a small item behind when they move a jur. A stone, a bowl, a mark in the grass. Not for superstition, but as a whisper to the land. We were here. We remember you. Remember us. You stand and brush off your hands, then return to your own gur. The felt is already warm from the stove inside. The rugs are soft underfoot. The roof curves above you like a question with no wrong answer. This is where lives begin and end, where ancestors linger and stories echo. This is where the wind is met not with walls but with understanding. And this, strange as it may sound, is where the circle always knows how to close itself. The night deepens and your jur folds into darkness like a secret. The fire has gone to embers, glowing low in the centre of the room like a heartbeat under skin. Outside, the wind has quieted, not disappeared, just softened, moving in long, slow waves over the steppe, as if it too is tired. You lie back on the thick felt floor, your head resting against a rolled blanket, and everything is still, not in the way cities sleep, with engines humming, clocks ticking, and lights always on, but in the way the land sleeps when it knows nothing is chasing it. The jur holds you now, not like a trap, not like a weight, but like a palm cupping a candle. All around you, the circle breathes. The wooden ribs creak a little in the cool night air, but it's not unsettling. It's like the house is stretching in its sleep. The rope binding the khana pulls gently tighter as the temperature drops. Everything adjusts. Nothing resists. And above, the tonneau is open just enough to show you stars. It's strange to think how old this design is. How unchanged. How perfect. In a world of upgrades and updates and engineered obsolescence, the gur remains. Not because it refuses change, but because it changes only what needs to. It teaches by existing, about resilience, about rhythm, about knowing which way to face when you open your door in the morning. You think back on everything we've passed through together tonight. The elegant physics of the circular wall, the sacred spine of the central pillars, the wisdom woven into felt, the songs carried on the wind, the weddings and funerals, the dishes with QR codes, and the satellite domes humming quietly beside stoves lit by horse dung. And still, it's all one thing, all wrapped into this structure that welcomes both tradition and solar panels, that greets ancestors and broadband with equal patience. That says, yes, you can live simply and still be modern. You can move and still belong. You can bend without ever breaking. The jur doesn't lecture, it doesn't boast, it just shows you how to stay standing in a world that never stops shifting. And in this moment, just before sleep, you're not thinking about Wi-Fi signals or wind speeds. You're thinking about breath, fire, wool, and the strange, sacred shape of feeling safe without standing still. The wind stirs one more time, brushing past the felt like a familiar hand. And you let go. So now, as we leave the Mongolian steppe behind, you can let the images settle. The low doorway, the glow of the fire, the perfect circle that never shouts, but always knows how to hold you. Let it fade slowly behind your eyes. The world will always push, the wind will always howl. But in some corner of your mind now, there is a space that knows how to stay warm, how to bend, how to breathe. That's the gift of the gur. You don't need to build walls against everything. Sometimes a curve is stronger than a corner. Sometimes warmth comes from memory, not machinery. And sometimes the best design is the one that disappears into the land when you're done with it, leaving nothing but a bit of pressed grass and a trail of smoke still rising toward the stars. You're safe now, surrounded, sheltered. The wind is passing by, not through. Let it hum past, like a lullaby without lyrics. Let the stove fade to cool. Let the stories settle into your chest like coals under ash. Let the circle hold you. Sleep well tonight, fellow traveller of curved roads and old winds. And when you wake, may your door always face the sun.